Here's the thing about restaurant lease negotiations. The restaurant owner has one number in mind. The landlord has a completely different number, most likely in their mind. And neither side is going to tell the other side what that number is going to be until we go through a whole bunch of different rounds of negotiations and site visits and photos and contractors. It's just the way that it is, right? But today, I think it's time we kind of put all the cards on the table. We're going to have a sample space with some rents that are fairly common in Westchester and Fairfield County, and we're going to run through it. I'm going to show you what the math looks like from the tenant side, from the landlord side. This way, you know what the other person is thinking on the other side of the table and exactly how the math plays into that decision. Every restaurant lease negotiation comes down to the exact same question. Can the operator afford this space? All right, let's get into this because I think it's really interesting to look at this from the other side's perspective. So if you're a landlord watching this or you're a tenant watching this, hopefully you'll learn something, maybe gain a little bit of insight, because I think it actually helps you in your negotiation. But it's fairly simple. Every negotiation comes down to whether the operator can or cannot afford the space. Period. That's it. That's what the ultimate question is. Can they afford to pay this? And it doesn't come down to the rent necessarily. It comes down to one thing, and that's your sales projection. So for years, the industry has used this thing called the 10% rule. For me, I prefer to call it the 8% rule. That's where I like to see a lot of my tenants land. But you'll see why later, how that depends on the type of restaurant you are. So let's just start talking about the numbers, because that's what's really going to make the most sense here. And I'm super visual, so I think it'll be helpful for you guys to see this as well. I have this platform here, a little buddy called Claude, who has helped me out. And if you guys have not messed with that, that'll be a whole other video. There's lots of ways it's going to help you. But this is a tool that I created, and I think it will be available in the show notes, hopefully in time for this episode to drop, or you can use this for yourself, for any site that you're checking out, because it truly is super critical when it comes down to deciding if a site is a go or something that you pass on. So let's just take a look at this. The rule of 10 says that your occupancy cost, which is your base rent plus your triple net cost, should never exceed more than 10% of your gross sales. So the 10% rule is your total occupancy cost, which is your base rent plus your triple net costs. That should never exceed 10% of your gross sales. All right, that's been an industry standard forever, and it is a pretty good rule of thumb. Fast casual can push like 12%. Full service, for a couple different reasons, needs to be 8 or 9%. Fine dining should be closer to 6%. And that range really for each one of those different types of service styles is truly everything. But let's go ahead and share my screen here. All right, so this is the calculator here that I set up, called the calculator. But it's pretty simple to use. You have the tenant stuff on this side, on the left-hand side. You have the landlord information, the cap rates on this side. Get into the cap rates and what they are in a second. But let's start with the space itself, which I picked this size space because this is about the average of what most operators are looking for right now, at least the ones that I'm working with. And that's about 1,500 square feet. So we got a space here that's 1,500 square feet, $55 a square foot rent, $18 in triple net charges. So if you're watching this from any other part of the country, that may seem a little high, but the triple net charges, mainly due to taxes here in Westchester County, can be up there. So I put it at $18 a square foot. And I got super conservative, really just to run through this example to show you how this number will impact the decision-making process. I have sales of $750,000. And on the bottom here, which I really wish was on the top, will make things a little bit easier for me, but I'm a little nitpicky on this stuff. The concept type is a drop down. So you can toggle between fast casual, QSR with a counter, full service, or fine dining. All right. So in this example, the base rent is $55 a square foot. The triple net charges, the CAMs, are $18 a square foot. So that's $73 per square foot in rent every year. Now, the simplest calculation of all, step one in this whole process, is your annual occupancy cost. And that number is one that operators don't really write down. Some of them may tell you a range that they're in, but you should know it. You should understand it, because if it starts to go too high, you'll see the impact of that. But so basically, you're going to take 1,500 square feet, multiply it by 73, which is your total rent, and you're going to get a number of $109,500, so $1,500. That's the check you're writing to the landlord every single year, all right? Or before you pay an employee, before you buy any ingredients, before you even turn on the lights or the gas, you owe that to the landlord. $9,125 every single month, no matter what, okay? Now, here's where the math gets critical. Instead of starting with the rent and asking if it's affordable, we're going to work backwards. We're going to work backwards and see exactly how much this space needs to generate in sales and your business in order to make this a viable site worth pursuing. So this is where the rule of 10 comes in again. So we have our annual sales. Okay, the formula is very simple. It's annual sales divided by your target rent percentage, which again, drop down here, but we're going to keep this at 10%. So you have annual rent of $109,500 divided by 10% gives you over here on the right-hand side in this sort of middle section, a minimum sales needed of $1,095,000. All right. So if you round that up, that's about $3,000 a day. That's at 365 days. We all know you're not going to be open 365 days. So figure it out and figure out exactly how many days you are open to get that number. But again, this is an example just to give you an idea what the math looks like and the formulas are like. Now, when you do your calendar and figure out what your actual business days are or should be, if you close on a snow day or if a piece of equipment breaks and you can't open, lunch business is just dead, you still owe that money, right? So before you sign a lease in any market, you need to know this number and you need to really believe that you can execute on it. And that's really where the negotiation begins because the landlord's going to run that number. And I'll show you why, again, when we get to their side. But what most people miss is that it's not universal. So we have the drop downs here: fast casual, QSR, full service, fine dining. It changes based on the concept. And the landlords also, they understand that as well. So don't think you can be your landlord on a rent number. They're going to know or have a pretty good idea of what your sales are going to be, and they can adjust the rent accordingly. That's the way that it goes. A bank, even though it's the same square footage as you, does not pay the same rent. And that's, again, maybe a little piece of information that you didn't know, but that's exactly how it works. But full service needs higher sales to justify the exact same rent because the labor costs more, the ticket times are longer, the food is more expensive for them to buy, and the turns are slower. So the concept determines the math, and the math is what's going to determine whether or not you're going to sign this lease. Now, I'm going to show you what this looks like when it goes wrong, really wrong. And you may be noticing this here on the bottom because this is not hypothetical. And I have seen groups do this in Westchester and in Fairfield and other parts of the country where they overestimate what they're going to do in terms of sales, or their projections are that far off and they're overconfident. Their ego's like, this market is way better suited for us. We're going to do 30% more than we do in XYZ over here. Big mistake, right? You always want to use the numbers that you're familiar with. So let's look at this here. $750,000 in sales. Annual occupancy cost, $109,500. Remember the rule of 10? Your rent ratio here is 14.6% for a QSR concept with a counter, right? So we'll walk up traditional kind of QSR. Now, that operator just signed a lease that their own sales projection doesn't support. It makes no sense. It's not even by a little. We're talking about 5 points. So that's not tight margins in the restaurant business conversation. This is a major death spiral. How do I get out of this lease type problem? That's exactly what this is. And often by the time they figure it out, they're already well into their business. They've already built out this space. They're into it for how many hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the rent is just either adding up because they're not paying or just bleeding them dry because the business can't sustain it. So let's look at a couple other examples. Because if you go to fine dining, max 8%, 9%, and you adjust these sales, if you go this, I didn't change the number. So if you go 12% here, right? And this fast casual does 1.5 million, now you're within range. All right. So obviously other concepts, fine dining concept, no one's going to do $3 million out of a 1,500 square foot space, but you see my point. Now, so let's flip this around. Same space, same rent. Let's put this back to 750. Okay. Same deal. And here's what the landlord's looking at. So this is their side. So you'll see here, scenario A, scenario B, scenario C. These are all the cap rates: 6%, 5.5, and 5%. And I'm going to explain cap rates very simply because they do confuse a lot of people, including people who have been in real estate for a long time. But it's simply this: capitalization rate. And all it really means is if I paid cash for this building, what percentage of my money do I get back every single year from the rent? That's it. That's it. Nothing more complicated than that. So I'll give you a very, very simple example. You have a lemonade stand. You paid $100 to build it out. And every year you make $6 off of it. Not a very good lemonade stand, but $6 divided by $100, that's 6%. That's your cap rate. So there it is. Don't overthink it. There are a couple other ways that a cap rate can get confusing in terms of determining the value of a property and what, cap rates going up and down may do to the market overall, but that's not what we're talking about today. But if we apply that to your building, the landlord collects the rent, okay? In this case, he's collecting $109,500. That's their income. And the cap rate tells you what that income is worth as a percentage of what the building costs. Here's the part that gets really interesting. Cap rates, and maybe confusing, rates and property values move in opposite directions, okay? So if a cap rate is really high, then the price of the property is really low. Now I know what you're thinking. Wait, I'm making more money, but it costs me less? Yeah, generally because it's riskier. And most people who are investing in these properties are not looking for those risky type investments. Some people are, most people are not. But when cap rates go down and building values go up, when cap rates go up, building values go down. Okay, so they move like a seesaw. Always, every time, not an option. This is how the math works. So I'm going to show you on this calculator what that looks like. So our landlord collects $109,500 every year in rent. That's the number we already calculated. Again, same deal, same building, same rent. Annual rent, $109,500. At a 6 cap, down here you'll see the building value. At a 6 cap, it's $1,825,000. That's the value of that building. At a 4.5 cap, 1.9, just over 1.9. And at a 5 cap, 2.1, almost $2.2 million. Now you're saying to yourself, that'll just happen. The rent didn't change. The tenant didn't change. And the building obviously didn't change. But the building is worth 3 just because the cap rate changed from 6 to 5? Yeah. It's exactly how it works. And this is why landlords care so much about the quality of their tenant. It's not about collecting rent every month. That's not what it's about. It's about the quality of the tenant and paying the rent. Brands that have better credit, have a better product, they're worth more stable, lower rate, but they're not going anywhere. Okay, that's why they call it mailbox money, triple net lease. Tenant pays everything and just keeps coming every month, every year, all the time, often generationally. Look at McDonald's. How many of those McDonald's are still around? My guess is they haven't changed hands that many times. So very valuable investments. And here's a real world scenario for you, right? I just gave you the Chick-fil-A example, but a corporate guaranteed QSR, so corporate credit, on a 15-year triple net lease, meaning they're paying for everything, might trade at a 5 cap in Westchester. Now, a local restaurant operator on a 5-year lease with maybe 2 years left, same rent, same building, might trade at a 7 cap. Run that math. Same rent, $109,500 a year. Corporate triple net corporate triple net at 5%, 2.1, almost 2.2. A local tenant, let's just change this here for the math purposes, 7.5 is just under 1.5. That's a value difference of $730,000. Same rent check, same building, different tenant. And that tenant profile is what created the difference. So that's why sophisticated Westchester landlords are not just looking at your rent offer. That is not what it's about. They're looking at your concept. They want to know about your sales history. They want to know about you. They want to know how much term you're looking for. And of course, they're going to want to talk about your guarantee. Again, that's another one. That's it. That's all the video. Because all of this goes into determining what their building is worth today. And that's super important to them because that is their business. Their business is generating revenue to support their family from the rent. Your business is making food for people, making drinks, having great hospitality, providing a service to the neighborhood, to the community, and making money in exchange for that to support your family. So 2 separate businesses. You got to remember that. being a landlord is a business. So here's what the deal looks like from both sides at the same time. You got a restaurant operator thinking to themselves, well, can I hit $3,000 a day? Well, if not, then I'm not going to sign it. Okay, if my sales history has been the last 7 years, I do 2,300 on average a day, and we're doing really well at that store. This seems like a stretch. Doesn't seem like a lot. 2,300 to 3,000. It's a big difference, right? And the landlord is thinking, does this tenant make my building worth more or less? Now is it all starting to click? Because the operator needs a sales projection before they get to an LOI. The operators don't have a sales projection. I don't know what you're looking at. A landlord needs financials, and they want to understand what your build-out budget is and how much money you're going to be putting into that. Again, same deal, same space, same rent, two completely different thought processes and two completely different conversations. And the broker that knows both sides of this, they're the one that's going to get the deal done, and neither side's going to get hurt. That's what their job is. Now, I've been on every side of this transaction. I've been the operator, I've been the tenant rep, and I've been the landlord rep. And I've seen a lot, and I've heard a lot, and this is exactly why that matters. It takes 30 seconds. We run it every single time, and it's going to save you from signing a lease that your business can't support. And I think that's the difference between myself and a lot of other brokers is I know how much money, how much effort, how much just emotional energy it takes to make the decision to open a restaurant just to not run the numbers and have it not work out. I am not putting any of my clients through that because it will ruin families. It'll ruin relationships. It will ruin so many different things if you get this wrong. When it's so easy to just run the numbers and see if it's going to work. So now if you're an operator and you're looking for space in Westchester, Fairfield County, and you haven't run these numbers yet, send me a DM, send me an email. All my contact information is in the show notes, and we can sit down, we can meet for coffee, we can talk for 15 minutes, and we can just run these numbers. We can see what they look like. We can run a 5-year pro forma. We can do all that. We can do all of that before you do anything with the landlord. And if you're a landlord trying to figure it out, and you're curious about asking rents and market dynamics, or if a particular restaurant tenant is viable for the Westchester Fairfield market, same offer, okay? 15 minutes, and I'll give you a straight answer. All right, hopefully you guys learned something here, and now you have a better understanding what the other side of the table is thinking when they enter this negotiation. And if you did get value from it, share it with your friend who's a restaurant owner. Share it with somebody you know who's looking to start a restaurant or grow their restaurant here in Westchester or Fairfield County. And maybe you just subscribe. Maybe subscribe to this channel because we're going to keep talking about these things. A lot of things actually came to mind when I was talking about some of this stuff here as topics that we should get into. So stay tuned. Thank you for checking out this video, and I'll see you guys next time.